Welcome to Celebrating Everyday People. My name is Yana Larson, and my co-host today is Birgit Ben-Eli. Malcolm Burman, my usual co-host, is doing tech support. You may remember that we have an expanded team now in our second season to bring deeper content to our show. So we will have monthly segments around the topics of public health, like we did with Tassin Bashar, and today with Arts with Birgit Ben-Eli. You can find us on malcolmpresents.com and on Malcolm's YouTube. We also have a Facebook page, and we're on Buzzsprout in all major directories and beyond as we enhance our online presence. Welcome, Birgit. Let's talk about the arts segment.
Thanks, Jana. I'm very excited about that. So do you
Me
have any
too.
specific question or do we need to, how would you like to start?
Well, I thought we would just do like we did with Tassin, that he just talked about. He introduced himself a little bit more about what he does with epidemiology as a master's student.
Okay.
And we did have our broadcast where we introduced ourselves. So you can reintroduce yourself. I don't know if we ever really talked about the fact that you have quite the art history background, and you have traveled abroad widely, lived abroad widely. So you do have a lot of uh, insight into art. And so I think it would be important to talk about the importance of art in our world and in our perception of happiness, because we can't just live by bread alone. We need the arts to keep ourselves happy.
We do need the arts, and I think the arts has a much wider purpose than creating happiness. I mean, art is intentional. It creates happiness, obviously, for the creator, but beyond that, obviously, the artist also wants to send, it's not only sending a message, and it's not only creating happiness. It's taking risk, right, in engaging a population. It's healing. Art can heal, and that might be the intention too. So art per se, I think, comes from art serves more than that, and it serves for those who create, it serves those who view it, and it tells us obviously about the context of wherever we come from. And since you mentioned my background, I have lived, which we heard before, in 7 countries. I have worked in different fields in the art field, from writing to I did something with music projects. I did, but my original background is fine arts. So I have, so art beyond that is not only fine arts. It's like, and that's what I would like to talk about in the future. It's everything, from literature, from music, from, jewelry, anyone who's in design or
Yeah.
creating installation. It's anything. And since I've lived in 7 countries, I would like to broaden this to show that despite creating happiness and despite creating a message, that there's something we share no matter where we come from. And I think in the world where we are so divided, it is very important, at least for me personally, to emphasize our shared humanity and bring us together. And I think this is what art really does. It just it creates understanding of other cultures. It creates emotions and thoughts and desires, and I think it helps us to understand other people and other cultures. So that's why I always liked art. That's the experience I have from the background I did, of having lived in different places, having done and seeing that we share more than what divides us. So and art per se, I mean, it creates feelings, as you just mentioned, happiness. It creates knowledge about other cultures, or about the person, or about the place we are living in, the context, depending,
And it's,
historically
and it's
or even in the
very
present.
sorry,
Pardon?
it's really reflective of current times too.
Yeah.
Very expressive, and you can tell a lot about, from looking at art through time, what life might have been like, or as in what it's reflecting, like in the days when you could see that children were dressed as little adults, and they weren't dressed in completely different children and clothes. They were
Mm.
there as miniature adults. And I remember that from the little bit of art history that I've had.
No, but I agree with you. So it's not a art, that's actually the interesting part. And I used to work in that field when I were in academics, when I was in academics. Art tells us more, not only about the artist, but it tells us, looking backwards, but also in the present, about the environment we live in. And it teaches us, right? And it warns us. And in some ways, if you think about, let's take Van Gogh as an example, right? If you look at the brush strokes, the way he created his art, you can sense the personality behind this. So, I mean, if you look from an art historical background, there are different ways of approaching this, right? You look at the person, who was that person, and what does his art reflect about his time? And if you take Van Gogh as an example, right, with this nervous brush stroke, you can read every single detail into, as an example in this sense, a painting. You can decide, you can even see if someone is left-handed or right-handed. That's not necessarily an emotion, but you can see this if someone paints, how they started the painting, if you have a really close look at it. And I find this exciting. But again, this is only little art historical details, but I think art is a testament of our past, our present, and maybe even our future. I mean, and again,
My
it
mind is
serves a lot of
it's
pardon.
just crazy with all these art related things that are just I can tell it's bubbling over in me. Like whenever we're talking, we're always we get excited when we're talking together about anything. Um,
Yeah.
okay, so two things I want to bring up about art. One is fashion as art, and the other is about um, well, it's kind of broader, but like when as a child, when you ask them, "Are you an artist?" They'll go, "Yes, I'm an artist," and yet it gets kind of taught out of us, don't you think? As adults, we start to become intimidated, and so our art talent, mine definitely did stop when I was about 9 or 10, because I can't look at something and draw it and make it look like what I want it to look like. So my art if I make any, is just like squiggles and hearts.
Mm. You know what? I think you touch upon a really difficult question. And I mean, being in New York, I very often go with friends or family to to different exhibitions or galleries or whatever. And sometimes I am also standing in front of a piece, like, why is it art? So what defines art, right? That's a difficult question. I usually tell people something that tells them, an artist what tells you a story, art is what is a reflection of the time, art is what's innovative and what's creative. And talking about creativity, I absolutely agree with you. Creativity is stifled in children early on. That there's certain expectations to conform, that art per se, may it be art classes or music, theater, whatever, is absolutely undervalued in I think in society, but also in schools, right? If programs are cut, these are the first subjects that are cut. And I think creativity, if you take art, goes beyond, right? If someone is creative and you stifle this creativity, it might translate also into other spheres. Someone would have liked to venture out. Yeah, I think it has a big influence on brain development too. And what changes society, what changes, how do inventions happen? It's with creativity. So art in that sense even transcends the art per se. It's like creativity is a lot more than that. And since you also mentioned fashion, it's the same thing with fashion, right? Fashion tells us something about the time. Fashion is, for me it's the same as jewelry, any form of design. For me, that's art too. It's creativity too. And this is a good example, right? We talk about how creativity is stifled in children already at such a young age, how it's undervalued. And you see, art is not only art. It can go into fashion, as you just said. It can go into designing who knows what chip, tech chip or whatever. I just met today someone who founded some tech company. And so it's a lot
And
more than that. But Pardon?
film styles, when you look back at something that was made in the 70s and at the time it's just like so modern.
Yeah, that's true.
You look at it 50 years later and we think, oh,
Yeah.
God.
So, but again, when we are not talking about that field I just mentioned, right? Someone who creates something and then has a tech company, that's obviously a different field, but it's creativity too. So, and
Exactly.
that's what I'm saying. Creativity, I think we underestimate the importance of creativity. But coming back
Exactly.
to that, what I'm going to do, obviously, in this context of our podcast, that I will bring in, you know what, we could widen the field eventually. But, I would focus currently on art in a wider sense, yet narrowed down that it includes, fashion designer, photography, literature, jewelry,
Well, and then
sculptures.
globally too, because you're so connected all over the world. You have friends everywhere, and so that's something that I'm sure that you'll want to look into that. I don't know what your plans are, but I'm sure you'll have ideas galore for how we'll do that.
I think, it's not only the environment we live in, which is so divisive. I think beyond that, it is important. I think the more we know about the other, um, the more we embrace, not only learn for ourselves, we also learn to embrace someone who is different. And difference, I think we spoke about that before, is for me the oxygen, the air that creates some form of excitement. And it's very interesting. I shouldn't maybe say that here, but I was just talking to a friend about that. About if everyone is the same, I prefer the one thing that is different because I find it boring if everyone is the same. However,
Absolutely.
again, talking about the international context, I find it exciting to bring in people from different places, see how they thrive or live and create in their environment, what differentiates them from us, but without being an them versus us. It's a them and us, and what unites us. And I find that exciting because I think, again, difference is stimulating intellectually, creatively, and 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 yet at the end of the day we are all the same. So I like to find the little thread, that the little line, where there is not a line that divides, but that we come from different places and yet we are the same. And so
And
I'm very
also,
excited to bring in people from other places.
right, and bring attention to the kind of art that they're doing because it can be really hard. I mean, uh, uh, an artist would like to be go beyond poverty stages to be able to survive as an artist, which is very hard to do. I
Yeah,
think as a musician, well, any of the arts, it's hard to stand out, and there are many different reasons why somebody would want to pursue um, a career in art or whatever. I know personally from having been married to an artist that it's very hard
yeah,
to survive and there and how vulnerable he felt. All of his paintings, it was just like it's putting out something of yourself on the walls and then wondering if people are going to like it.
yeah, it's
And
hard.
I remember his comments where like other artists will look at it and go um that when they're looking at art, they're looking at brush strokes or whatever, something like that, or use of
That's an
color.
interesting aspect you bring in here.
And the other artists, other people, the viewers, hopefully the buying public were like, oh, what were you thinking? And or did it match their sofa colors?
I know, but that shows too that art serves different purposes, that artists also take risks to be exposed, because that's someone who doesn't like. And I think I mentioned that I used to write about art as well. And sometimes when I was asked about some artists to write about, art is not only an intellectual thing, and also, well, it's emotions too. But sometimes I couldn't connect to the artist. I don't like it. Is, what? It's always easy to tear someone down. What I find a lot more important is to build someone up. So if I couldn't connect, I still try to find the good, or not connect or understand the art, I still try to find the good and not just say, it's easy to say I don't like. I think that's human nature. We always focus on, we rarely, the majority, we don't emphasize what the positive, we emphasize the negative, right? And I find it much more important. And that's why I love the podcast too. In addition to what you just mentioned, that we will focus on everyday people. So the people we bring in here, some might have a bigger name than others, but they are not the big names, that have already a million interviews, that are on whatever, shows and wherever they appear, shows on TV, radio, whatever, or shows in big museums. I find that important to give all those other artists who are not on that stage, to give them a voice, because at the end of the day, I think their lives are much more telling and resemble everyday people like us, right? I mean, and so it's
Well,
easier
and
for us to connect.
you're bringing up the concept of appreciation when you find out more about the artist and what inspired him or her to produce what he or she did, and
Mm.
what areas of art that they're interested in. And it helps you to have a better understanding, and to look at something in a different way, just like why you take music appreciation, or you study a writer, and you can understand more about why they write the way they do, or the subjects that they pick. And just because someone is very good at like doing a certain kind of art, or a certain kind of dance, or a certain kind of painting style or jewelry style, it's as different as any of us all are. And it should be more welcoming, and out for everyday people, and to be understood by everyday people just because they like it, and that's
Yeah.
okay. And it doesn't have to be something that's too highbrow, or not highbrow enough, or all those other different reasons why people can be so intimidated
And
by it.
And thank you for bringing this up, because that's another aspect where we are going to do this. Because you know what? It's not only to show appreciation and give those a voice who might not have the loudest voices, but it's also to inspire maybe those who question themselves and don't dare to venture out. That's number one. And number two, the creativity is more than creating an art piece. And as you just mentioned before, we all can be creative, and we shouldn't question ourselves too much, and it doesn't matter what level of creativity, because that brings us back to art is healing, creativity is healing, it has a healing aspect, which I think we totally underestimate. And it doesn't, again, it might not be the big art that's, let's say I'm here, then, MoMA, Museum of Modern Art of New York, but it's still art, it's still creativity. And or even if you don't label it art, like the art in the traditional sense,
Art with a capital A.
art with a capital A. I love that. It's the, let's call it creativity. I think it's a creative work.
Let's call it a language.
And language. I love that's a good idea. So I think so I'm excited about this. It's dialogue. I hope it invites to dialogue too. And that's that we can create that environment that people will respond and say, hey, I like this, thank you for giving me, the stamina to do something, and to engage. And
Started on their
so
own, and because
yeah.
they like, oh, I like that style, oh, I see how I can do that, and get joy out of doing it. I remember during the pandemic I did a lot of coloring. I had all those,
It's
there were all these,
therapeutic. I mean, I
oh,
agree.
it was very therapeutic. And I did try to do some art design on my own, and it wasn't very refined. But as I kept all those books and looked back, I've gone, wow, I did a lot of
But
artwork.
and Jana, you know what? You bring up another great idea, to bring in people who um, talk about the importance of art from a therapeutic and healing perspective, because that would be interesting too. To hear, and I'm sure there are plenty of studies out there how music and art, what effect it has on the brain, and it's even
Yes,
used
even
in
Alzheimer's
psychiatric.
patients.
Pardon, I didn't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry, but I was agreeing with you. The Alzheimer's patients who
Yeah.
haven't been able to express in any way, but then give them a piano, all of a
Mhm.
sudden that part of the brain wakes up and they can perform, they can play music. That's
Yeah, that's
fascinating.
incredible. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
So,
It's the same with singing, right? There are also studies with singing like that, with Alzheimer and
mhm.
singing. And again, also with for psychiatry and children, of how that helps children, music and art, and how it's used to heal. So I think that's a very interesting aspect beyond bringing people together on an international level, to bring in the importance of art from a professional level, of what does it actually mean, what does it show, how does it
I,
show up in studies,
I
and there's
think we're going to learn
plenty out
a lot
there.
thanks to you. And would you believe we didn't know we were going to talk about, and it's already been 20 minutes. So our time is
Always
up.
exciting to talk to you, Jana.
Oh, Birgit, um, same here, igualmente. Um, so anyway, thank you, Birgit, for being here. I think this is
Thank
going
you
to be
for
a really
having me.
fascinating segment, and as you know, we'll be doing it once a month. And Tessie will have once a month guest, and
Hmm.
then Malcolm and I will do the other 2 or 3 times. So I think that we'll be able to bring a lot of content to our podcast, and hopefully will be of interest to lots of people.
Very excited about that. Thank you, Jana.
Yeah. So thank you, Brigade. Remember to like, share, and follow us. And you can leave us a message at malcolmpresents.com if you have questions or comments, and we hope you do. Goodbye from Malcolm and me and Brigade on celebrating everyday people. Thank you.
Thank you.